There is a tire lying in the middle of a residential street. The street has no lighting of any kind. It is a Wednesday evening in February, and someone has placed that tire there on purpose in the dark and then walked away to wait. The street is Sanctuary Boulevard in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. On the 16th of February 2022, a 33-year-old Microsoft manager named Jared Bridegan stopped his car there, switched on his hazard lights, and got out to move the tire out of the road. He was shot and killed within seconds. His wallet, his watch, and his phone were all still with him when police arrived. Prosecutors in Duval County say this was a contract killing, planned across several weeks and paid for out of a family trust. 3 people have been charged. As of August 2026, none of them has been convicted, and all 3 are presumed innocent. For more than a year, detectives had almost nothing. No witness to the shooting, no usable footage of a face, no weapon, then or now. What eventually broke the case open was the tire itself, sitting in an evidence locker the whole time, and a set of numbers stamped into its sidewall that nobody had thought to read. Jared Bridegan was born in Missouri in 1988 and raised in Jacksonville. He attended the Douglas Anderson School of the Arts, a public magnet school on the city's south side, and graduated in 2007. He studied cinema production at Utah Valley University in Orem and finished his degree in 2014. He ended up in software, user experience design, which is the job of making complicated systems feel simple to ordinary people. He worked at a web hosting company, then a nutrition company, and joined Microsoft in October 2017. By 2022, he was a senior design manager working from a home office in St. Augustine, about 40 minutes down the coast. He built a gymnastics bar in the backyard because one of his daughters was into gymnastics. He taught himself to skateboard as a grown adult so he could keep up with his son. He taught Sunday school to 11 and 12-year-olds at his church. His obituary described him as funny, happy-go-lucky, and a little bit shy. He had 4 children, twins named Abby and Liam from his first marriage to Shanna Gardner, whom he married in Salt Lake City in 2010. Then 2 more daughters, Bexley and London, with his second wife Kirsten, whom he met on a dating app in 2017 and married that same year. That ordinariness became the central problem of the investigation. When detectives started looking for enemies, they could not find any. Kirsten Bridegan testified in court that her husband carried no significant debts, did not gamble, worked from home most days, and had a small circle of friends. He was, by every account entered into the record, a careful man. The 16th of February 2022 was 2 days after Valentine's Day. Jared took 3 of his children to a barbecue restaurant that evening and then to a fast food window for ice cream. At around 6:29, he sent a 1-word text message to his ex-wife's house to say that he had arrived. The twins went inside. He got back in the car and headed south towards St. Augustine with his 2-year-old in the back seat. At roughly 7:45, he called Kirsten from the road. Nothing about the conversation was unusual. She testified later that it ended in a silence she found strange at the time and could never quite explain afterwards. Keep that call in mind. It becomes important about 4 minutes from now. His route home ran through a development called Sanctuary. One stretch of Sanctuary Boulevard has no street lighting at all. A police sergeant who responded that night told the court that the darkness there is severe enough that a driver cannot see the hood of his own car. That is where the tire was. Jared stopped, hazard lights on. He stepped out into the road and a figure fired 4 shots from a 10mm handgun. He died on the street beside his own vehicle. His 2-year-old daughter was in the back seat and was not physically harmed. Nothing was taken. Not the wallet, not the watch, not the phone. For several minutes afterwards, nobody came. Then traffic began to back up behind a stationary car with its hazard lights still blinking, and a couple named Jonelle and Shane stopped to see what the obstruction was. They found Jared in the road. Then Shane found the child in the back seat and lifted her out of her car seat. They asked her what had happened. She told them she had heard a loud noise and that her daddy was hurt, and she asked whether the police were going to help him. Jonelle later described her to reporters as the bravest little girl she had ever met. The child was taken to the police station in Jacksonville Beach and sat there for hours while officers worked the scene. There was nothing there for a 2-year-old. No blanket, no toy, nothing to hold. Remember that detail. It matters more than almost anything else in this story, but not for another 15 minutes. Jared Bridegan could not reach her husband by phone. That silence at the end of the call was still bothering her, so she got into her car and drove toward the beach. Eventually, an officer picked up Jared's phone and directed her to the police station, where she was reunited with her daughter. That same night, before any suspect existed, she told detectives who she thought they should be looking at. She named her husband's ex-wife and her ex-wife's second husband. Naming someone is not evidence. For the next 12 months, the case went almost nowhere. Detectives could eliminate the easy theories fast. The untouched wallet ruled out robbery. The tire, placed in advance, ruled out any spontaneous confrontation on the street. Whoever did this had been waiting. What investigators did have was a truck. Home surveillance cameras in the neighborhood had recorded a 2-tone blue Ford pickup driving toward Sanctuary Boulevard, slowing near the scene, and then leaving. Jacksonville Beach police released those surveillance stills to local media. Dozens of tips came in. Detectives worked through pawn records looking for the handgun and came up empty. And by the summer of 2022, this had the shape of a homicide about to go cold. Then someone went back to the tire. Every tire built for sale carries a Department of Transportation code stamped into the sidewall. It identifies the manufacturer, the plant, and the exact week of production. It is effectively a serial number that nobody thinks about. Investigators used that code to go looking for the tire's twin. They found one leaning against the side of a rental house on Potomac Avenue, on the west side of Jacksonville, several miles from where Jared died. According to evidence presented at trial, the 2 tires were the same make and model and carried manufacturing codes from the same week. That match changed the direction of the entire investigation. The question was no longer who hated Jared Bridegan. The question was who had access to that house. The tenant renting the property was a man named Henry Tenon, and Tenon owned a 2-tone blue Ford pickup he had inherited. The house itself belonged to a rental company called First Choice Home Rentals, co-owned by Jared's ex-wife Shanna Gardner and her husband Mario Fernandez Saldana. Then detectives followed the money. Inside Tenon's truck they recovered check stubs from that rental company, signed by Fernandez. Prosecutors say 3 checks were written to Tenon in the weeks after the murder, totaling $10,000, and that the memo line on the largest referred to a business startup. Bank records introduced at trial put Tenon's account at 52 cents in early January 2022. By early February it was overdrawn. The phone records added a shape. Prosecutors say Fernandez and Tenon exchanged more than 60 contacts, climbing through January, peaking in February, the month of the killing, staying high in March, and then falling to nothing by August of that year. 2 men in near constant contact simply stopped speaking. Cell site analysis produced something the FBI described in court as practice runs. An agent testified that Tenon's phone had traveled Jared Bridegan's route twice before the murder, on the 5th of January and again on the 29th. The second trip carried the phone out toward St. Johns County, near Bridegan's home, and near a gymnastics facility his daughter used. Henry Tenon had never met Jared Bridegan. Not once. Everything from this point sits inside a live prosecution, so it needs to be said clearly and only once. Shanna Gardner has pleaded not guilty. Mario Fernandez Saldana has pleaded not guilty. Neither has been convicted of anything connected to this case, and both are entitled to the presumption of innocence. What follows is the state's theory, tested in open court and contested at every step by the defense. Jared and Shanna married in 2010 and divorced in Florida in 2015. Years of family court litigation followed, over custody of the twins, over support, over schooling, and over religion. They settled into a joint custody arrangement. Jared Bridegan testified that the relationship between the two households was hostile, and that communication happened almost entirely in writing. Prosecutors introduced text messages in which, they say, Gardner expressed a wish for her ex-husband to be gone. Her defense argues those were private messages between friends, not serious, and points out that the family court case had closed by mutual consent in October 2021, months before the killing. Under cross-examination, Jared Bridegan acknowledged she had told police there were never threats of violence. There is also money. Court filings state that Gardner's parents, who founded a large craft products company in Utah, established a trust for their daughter and her children, structured so that the funds were not legally hers. Prosecutors say Fernandez served as its trustee, and that trust money financed the killing. Henry Tenon was arrested first. He was questioned in July 2022, and his arrest in connection with the murder was announced in January 2023. In March 2023, he pleaded guilty in Duval County to second-degree murder with a weapon. He admitted to being the gunman. As part of that plea, he agreed to testify against Gardner and Fernandez. Fernandez was arrested in Orange County, Florida, on the same day. 5 months later, agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives arrested Shanna Gardner at a house in West Richland, Washington, where she had moved with the twins. Body camera footage recorded her mother watching from the property as she was handcuffed. The state attorney for the Fourth Judicial Circuit said publicly that the indictment reflected what she called Gardner's central role. So by late 2023, the state had a confessed gunman who had agreed to cooperate, a physical link through the tire, a documented money trail and cell site data. That is close to a complete case. It did not hold. In January 2025, Henry Tenon told the court that the sworn statements he had given against Gardner and Fernandez were false. Not mistaken. False. He asked for new counsel. In February 2026, Judge London Kite granted his motion to withdraw the guilty plea entirely, and Tenon told the court plainly that he wanted a trial. Prosecutors did not oppose it. That last part is the detail worth sitting with. The state did not fight to keep its own cooperating witness, which legal analysts in Florida read as a signal that prosecutors believed they no longer needed him. Henry Tenon now faces the full original set of charges, is presumed innocent, and is scheduled for trial in 2027, which means the case that reached a jury in 2026 was built almost entirely on circumstance. The trial of Mario Fernandez Saldana opened in Duval County on the 17th of August 2026 before Judge London Kite. He faces first-degree murder and solicitation to commit a capital felony. 2 other counts were dropped by prosecutors in July 2026 without public explanation, and in November 2025, the state withdrew its intention to seek the death penalty. In her opening statement, the assistant state attorney told jurors that the people who planned this intended a perfect crime and very nearly got one. She described the unlit stretch of Sanctuary Boulevard as the site of an execution. She told the jury that the tire in the road was as much a murder weapon as the gun. She also told them that 10 days after Tenon's arrest, Fernandez performed a factory reset on his phone and erased dozens of application accounts. A digital forensics detective from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office testified about the extractions and about a large volume of data deleted in March 2022, on the day Fernandez and Gardner were first interviewed by police. The state called that consciousness of guilt. The defense conceded the first point immediately. Jared Bridegan was murdered, his attorney told the court, and Henry Tenon was the man who did it. What the defense disputed was any involvement by his client. He argued the checks paid for real work on rental properties, including landscaping, roofing, and tile work, and that the startup money was an attempt to help a struggling tenant. Then he laid out what the state does not have. No DNA belonging to Fernandez was recovered from any tested item, while Tenon's DNA was identified on the tire. There is no eyewitness and no footage placing Fernandez at the scene. An FBI witness acknowledged under cross-examination that the cell site evidence shows approximate locations only and never puts Fernandez together with Tenon on the night of the killing. The handgun has never been found. There is one discrepancy nobody has publicly resolved. At a bond hearing in 2024, a detective testified that the payment for the murder was $150,000. The checks entered into evidence total $10,000. The difference has never been explained on the record. Now back to that police station, and the 2-year-old sitting in it with nothing to hold. In September 2022, Jared Bridegan established a foundation, and its main program supplies police departments with kits for child witnesses. Soft toys, blankets, diapers, cups, snacks, crayons. They are kept at police stations so that an officer has something to put in a child's hands on the worst night of that child's life. By early 2025, the foundation reported 66 of those kits in law enforcement offices across 17 states. She filed a wrongful death lawsuit in Duval County in February 2025 against all 3 defendants. That civil case was stayed in July 2025 until the criminal trials conclude. The family also supported the decision to take the death penalty off the table. Their stated reason was the twins, Jared's 2 eldest children, who lost their father and whose mother now stands accused of arranging it. Kirsten said in a statement reported by local media that the choice did not diminish the gravity or the evil of what was done. The trial of Mario Fernandez Saldana is expected to conclude in late August 2026. Shanna Gardner is scheduled to be tried separately before a different jury in September 2026. Henry Tenon is scheduled for trial in 2027. Until those verdicts are returned, all 3 remain presumed innocent, and everything described here remains an allegation being tested in a courtroom. What is not in dispute is the method. Whoever planned this understood that a man driving his daughter home did not need to be forced out of his car. He only needed a reason to stop. So they left a tire in a dark street because a certain kind of person will always get out and move it so that the next driver does not hit it. That is exactly what he did.